जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम everybody.
Assalamualaikum sir.
Salam. Challenge. Bismillah. Let's begin. Challenge. Let's begin. Bismillah. All right. So inshallah आज हम शुरू कर रहे हैं with the last, apparently the most easy and theoretical portion of the entire A-level syllabus, which basically has to do with conservation. So let me open a new page. ये टू चलें जी, आज का हमारा टॉपिक है जी कंजर्वेशन. All right. So what I'm going to do is, since ये purely theoretical topic है, so the only thing I'm going to use for these points are none other than your past papers and the mark schemes, inshallah. So what I'm going to do is, let's go through these points first, and then unlike other topics, मैं आपको against each point that we're doing here, I'm going to mark, I'm going to give you names of the papers and the question numbers. वो आप पहले note कर लें ताकि आपको जो कुछ भी मैं लिख रहा हूँ, that will be inshallah as a reference for the material that I will be using from past papers. Of course, I will be opening the mark schemes, the examiner reports right away. But again, okay. So conservation basically is all about us talking about the jitni bhi biodiversity hai, the variety in life that we've been talking about so far. How is that supposed to be conserved? Why is that supposed to be conserved? So what are the methods used for conservation? All of these questions are basically going to be answered in these points. Apparently आपको 8 points लग रहे हैं. Yes, they're lengthy, but again, their idea is very easy to understand. So the first point, discuss the threats to the biodiversity of aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems. I hope you understand aquatic का मतलब जितनी भी water life है basically. That's basically has to do with aquatic. And of course, terrestrial is earthbound, okay, ecosystems. Now, for this part, we are going to look at this topic individually also. Like in March 2020, there has been a question directly asked about this particular part. Variant 4.2, question number 10, and the part is B. Question number 10, part B. Okay. फिर इसी तरह B part है, discussed in the reasons for the need to maintain biodiversity. I mean, why is there a need? Why should we be concerned? कि क्यों अगर biodiversity naturally है, चलिए अगर वो खत्म हो रही है तो होने दें. What's the concern? So these reasons we are going to talk about. And again, in May-June 2013, May-June 2013, question paper 4.1, question 9, part E. A direct question has been asked. Discuss the reasons for maintaining biodiversity. Inshallah, usko bhi hum dekhte hain. And then you have the third part, which is really interesting. Okay, what are the methods of basically conservation? And especially और conserve हमें उन्हीं organisms को या animals को या plants को करना पड़ेगा, the ones that are endangered. And I hope you understand the idea of endangered species. The species that are about, it's feared that they will get extinct. So the methods are the following: the roles of zoos, that's number 1; botanical gardens, number 2; conserved areas, which includes national parks and marine parks, that's number 3. So number 3 has 2 portions to it. You have national parks, that's A, and you have marine parks. So आपने national parks के बारे में तो सुना होगा, लेकिन literally there are marine parks also, which means water parks. And then frozen zoos is the 4th method of conserving endangered species. You're protecting endangered species. And then you have seed banks. Inshallah, we will talk about this in detail. But again, for the C part, Let me give you the past paper references. Individual इस पे पूरा एक पूरा question आपको नहीं मिलेगा. Usually you will find questions that have to do with the general ideas of these. So for example, there is a question specifically on seed banks in May, June 2018. Okay. Question paper 4.2. And I think the variant question number is 9B part. Okay. Isi tarah, there is another question, I think slightly older, May, June 2014. May, June 14, it's question paper 4.2. And the question number, if I'm not wrong, is 9th B part. इसको भी आज हम देखते हैं इंशाल्लाह. मेरा target है कि at least we look at these parts. And then of course you have D, which is discuss the methods of assisted reproduction, including IVF, embryo transfer, and surrogacy used in the conservation. So it's basically an extension of the idea of conservation. कि हम कुछ artificial तरीके use करते हैं. We call that thing as assisted reproduction. And inshallah, we will talk about this, what exactly is assisted reproduction, using the following three methods, which are IVF, embryo transfer, and surrogacy, okay, in the conservation of animals. Again, for this, there are two things in the past papers in detail. You have October, November 2000, and ये जो मैं references लिख रहा हूँ, ये मैं आपके लिए लिख रहा हूँ, ताकि आप इनको note कर लें अपने पास. Although yes, we are going to go through all of these past papers, but it's good that for the sake of quick revision, you have these resources. So you have question paper 4.1, and then question number 9, part B. And also you have May, June 2018, maybe a question आया है. Question paper 4.3, question 9, part B. And then specifically for IVF, there is a question. October, IVF is this method, the first method that we saw. So it's October, November 2014. ठीक है जी, और ये question paper 4.3 है, variant 4.3, and question number 10. Okay. अच्छा जी, और फिर discuss the use of culling and contraceptive methods to prevent overpopulation or protected and overprotected. इसका as such मैंने जितना देखा मुझे question तो नहीं मिला, but the idea is very simple. We will look at that. And then use examples to explain the reasons for controlling alien species. Inshallah, we will also talk about this. Then G part, ye basically talks about the organizations around the globe that are involved in conservation. Inke naam aapne yaad rakhne hain, aur usually what they're doing is basically the same thing. So you have WWF, that's number one. Abbreviations ko highlight kar raha hu. Then you have CITES, which stands for Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. Yes, you need to remember this name. And some local and global conservation. ठीक है. इस पे भी there are questions. ये एक recent paper में है, October, November 2019. Question paper 4.3, question 9B part. And then finally, you have outlined how degraded habitats may be restored with reference to local or regional examples. Again, we have question on this. 2019, question paper 4.2 और question 9B. ये मैं आपको unlike other topics रुक के सबका references मैंने आपको इसलिए दे दिए हैं because ये purely theoretical है. आप text book खोलेंगे तो आपको इतना thick text नजर आएगा कि आपका पढ़ने को दिल ही नहीं करेगा और आप पहले ही बंद कर देंगे. लेकिन inshallah, once I give you all of the points that are exactly revolving around the marking scheme, then it will be easier for you to go through the textbook. So you would know what you need to know and what you don't need to know. Okay. So inshallah, we will begin with the first part, which is discuss the threats to biodiversity of aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems. Okay. So I'm going to try and make this as non-boring as I can in terms of bullet points, web diagrams, so that it's easier for you to remember. So let's look at the A part first, and then we will come to the question for this. Okay. Challenging. So that's the A part, and that's we are seeing the threats to biodiversity. Now the threats have been divided into 5 parts. Yeah, 5 types if you like. So again, I'm going to bubble this and let's draw around the bubble. So the first threat is loss of habitat. Loss of habitat and ecosystems, and usually the loss of habitat is caused by deforestation. ये ideas आपने पहले देखे हुए हैं. Okay, so I mean, one of the threat to biodiversity is when habitat loss happens, and one of the primary ways why habitat loss happens is by deforestation. ठीक है. Or deforestation, usually why is deforestation done? It is usually done to convert the land into agricultural use. So that's basically the rationale, if you like, for doing deforestation. Okay, so that's the first threat. The second threat to biodiversity includes pollution. Okay, जी. Or pollution के जो, I mean, if we keep on talking about the individual examples of pollution, there are many. लेकिन pollution ज़्यादातर is because of the waste products of homes. ठीक है जी. And especially the industrial and agricultural waste. ठीक है जी. Industrial or agricultural waste में आपको पता है. I mean, I'm sure if I ask you to think of examples, can you think of examples of some pollutants that have to do with that are domestic in nature and that are industrial in nature? Come on, this is honestly something जो कि आपसे general knowledge के तौर पे भी अगर कोई पूछे तो आपको idea होना चाहिए. क्या ख्याल है बच्चों? What do you think? So can you give me some examples of pollution and some examples how, like for example, what do you think are examples of pollutants? एक जो इसकी classical example है industrial pollutants की, that is okay, fertilizers. Okay, ठीक है, fertilizers हैं. उसके अलावा we also have yes, exactly, metals हैं. So there's a classical example that is expected from you. एक example आप जरूर याद रख लें, PCB. PCB stands for polychlorinated biphenyls. ठीक है, ये basically this chemical is used in various manufacturing processes, और ये this is a classical waste of factories. ठीक है जी, which is of course detrimental for water body. This is washed off in the rivers, of course, and that's detrimental to the marine life basically. ठीक है, और क्योंकि जो आपका threat है उसने खुद कहा है कि biodiversity both to the aquatic and the terrestrial, so we have to consider both of these options. Okay, so PCB is one example. फिर इसी तरह जो आपका जो plastic waste है, the plastic waste is again one of the major threats to biodiversity for marine and aquatic. ये जो आपके जितने turtles हैं या जितने भी turtles for example is a classical example, जो कि they mistakenly eat these plastic bags thinking them of as animals that they need to eat, and they choke and they die. Of course, death of one animal at large in an ecosystem disturbs the entire ecosystem. फिर इसी तरह yes, exactly, pollutant gases हैं. You have gases, many gases. I mean, आप सबसे देखें even carbon dioxide, जितनी greenhouse gases हैं आपकी, greenhouse gases हो गई, और इसी तरह और फिर the acid rain and all of that stuff, and you can keep on going. Again, so for example, you have sulfur dioxide. इसी तरह you have acid rain, for example, that basically causes acid rain. Okay, and similarly, there is another greenhouse gases मैंने mention कर दी है. ठीक है, greenhouse gases हैं. There is another very important phenomenon. I hope all of you know what is eutrophication. Eutrophication क्या होता है? When you know that the algae, they grow on the surface of the water, thus blocking the sunlight for the plants within the water bodies, and therefore, of course, I'm not going into details, but I'm expecting that you know this is the excess growth of algae, और ये especially जो coral reef के लिए बड़ा detrimental होता है, because coral reef is high in biodiversity. Coral reef is that huge variety at the base of the river bodies, जो कि plants की और different fungi की grow करती है. And if they don't get for light for photosynthesis, then of course that will be detrimental. So again, that's the second a major threat to biodiversity, and that is pollution. ठीक है जी. Now the third threat that we will be talking about is over exploitation of resources. Over exploitation of resources. यानी कि अगर इसको हम मेरीन में बात करें तो फॉर एग्जांपल overfishing is a classical example of over exploitation of resources. ठीक है. इसी तरह फॉर एग्जांपल ये जो हंटिंग की जाती है फॉर this special the fur and the skin and all of that stuff, again that's also hunting for fur, over hunting for fur, for example hunting animals for fur, and excessive aesthetic reasons. Of course this is over hunting, that's important. Okay. फिर इसी तरह the fourth reason is climatic change. Okay, I think we've done इसको मैंने production pollution में include कर दिया है. इसमें climatic change असल में pollution एक अलग threat है, लेकिन pollution से ही stem करता हुआ I will consider this as a separate thing, and that's the climatic change. Now climatic change no doubt is as a result of pollution, but again that's another threat separate from pollution. The climate change is as a result, of course, of pollution and specifically the air pollution. ठीक है जी. Air pollution to be precise. Okay, जिसमें greenhouse gases हैं. इसी तरह climatic change is also because of deforestation, by the way. Okay, it's also because of deforestation. Can anybody tell me why do we have the climatic change because of deforestation? Trees नहीं होंगे तो क्या नहीं होगा? Lesser trees, lesser carbon dioxide absorbed from the atmosphere, and therefore the levels of carbon dioxide increase in the atmosphere, giving rise to greenhouse gases. Okay, and the most important phenomena that I'm sure you haven't talked about or discussed about, and that is introduction of invasive alien species. Introduction of alien invasive. ठीक है. एलियन इन्वेसिव स्पीशीज क्या है? ये एक सेपरेट पॉइंट है एफ वाला. यूज एग्जांपल्स टू एक्सप्लेन द रीजंस फॉर कंट्रोलिंग एलियन इन्वेसिव स्पीशीज. असल में इसकी एग्जांपल्स डिटेल में हमने डिस्कस करनी है. मैं आपको जनरल आइडिया दे देता हूं. इफ यू लुक एट द नेम एलियन इन्वेसिव स्पीशीज, एक हैबिटेट में एक बाहर से स्पीशी हम खुद उसको इंट्रोड्यूस करवाते हैं. इट इज सेल्फ इंट्रोड्यूस्ड बाय ह्यूमंस. And it is not introduced just as mere fun, but it is basically introduced, for example, यानी कि for example हम किसी एक एनिमल को इंट्रोड्यूस कर रहे हैं ताकि वो एक और स्पीशी ऑफ एनिमल को जो है ना वो कंज्यूम कर ले, खा ले, ताकि we get rid of that, for example. But it can turn the tide upside down because it can actually disturb the entire ecosystem. Again, I will talk about that. It basically invades the species, the ecosystem, and it dominates in a sense that it's actually detrimental for the entire ecosystem, therefore becoming a threat to biodiversity. These are the 5 ways in which the biodiversity is under threat. Now let's quickly go to the paper. March 2020 का पेपर है और वेरिएंट 4 टू क्वेश्चन भी है. ठहरे, मैंने ख्याल से मैंने यहाँ पे खोला हुआ है कुछ, मैं देख लेता हूँ. मार्च 2020. यप, there you go. अच्छा जी, इसको मैं कॉपी पेस्ट करूँगा इंशाल्लाह और फिर हम इसको डिस्कस करते हैं, because I want again everything to be at one place in your notes so that at the end you don't have problem. Okay. अच्छा जी, इसको हम यहाँ पे पेस्ट करते हैं. Okay. So now let's look at this question in detail. Okay, Raji, describe named examples of threats to biodiversity of aquatic ecosystems and terrestrial ecosystem. आप देखें, if you go to the syllabus points, it's actually more or less the same. वो कह रहा है discuss the threats to biodiversity. Question has described named examples of threats to biodiversity of aquatic systems and terrestrial ecosystem. It's a 9-marker question. So let's see what the examiner has to say in the marking scheme. 9 marks हैं, उसने कुछ 13 के करीब points दिए हैं. So let's see what we've written falls under all of this. So number 1, habitat loss. Okay, I think that's the first thing that we talked about, loss of habitat. Or of course, the classical example of that is deforestation. That is just mentioning a sub point in the habitat loss is worth further marks. Or deforestation का named cause उन्होंने बताया, for example, clearing land for housing, agriculture, transport, or industry. And then habitat fragmentation. Okay, this is important. इसकी detail मैंने discuss नहीं की. Habitat fragmentation idea क्या है? कि deforestation की वजह से होता है. When you are doing deforestation, you're actually breaking down the bigger area into smaller chunks. So small, जब आपका habitat smaller chunks में divide हो जाता है, then we call this phenomenon as habitat fragmentation. For example, एक बड़ा सा habitat था, आपने बीच में जी से एक मेन रोड गुजार दी है, तो वो मेन रोड के गुजरने की वजह से you have two fragments, fragments A and fragment B. So that's basically what is known as habitat fragmentation. Okay, all right. And then named examples. Okay, for example, palm oil plantations in Southeast Asia. इस चीज के लिए आपको टेक्स्ट बुक पे जाना पड़ेगा. हर टॉपिक के लिए कम से कम एक एग्जाम्पल जो आपकी बुक में दी हुई है वो आपने जरूर, you have to remember that. Okay, I will try my best to give you one, but the reason I'm giving you the marking schemes and all of these points as a fast food, as some teachers say, is just because it's easier for you to memorize all of this stuff. Lekin, if you're thinking that you're going to get away with this topic without reading and going through the textbook, then I'm sorry, you're mistaken. You have to ensure कि आप टेक्स्ट बुक की डिटेल से जाएं. और इस लेसन के बाद आप जब वो करेंगे ना तो आपको बहुत बेहतर लगेगा, because you will understand what exactly do you want to know. Okay. Anyhow, point number 6, climate change, global warming description. Again, we've talked about this. Named cause, greenhouse gases. We've talked about that. Pollution, uski description, uski named examples, fertilizers, toxins, plastics. Over exploitation of resources, uski description de dein कि किस तरह resource over exploit होते हैं. For example, overfishing, hunting, animal trade. I didn't mention this one. I did mention overfishing and hunting. Or invasive alien species. I've talked about this. इसको भी हम separate point में discuss करेंगे इंशाल्लाह. और फिर named example of alien invasive species, grey squirrel in Europe. ये alien invasive species की examples एक दो मैं आपको खुद दूंगा इंशाल्लाह, जो कि आपके लिए याद रखनी easy हो जाएंगे. Okay, so I mean, if you look at these 13 points, all of these, ये जो मैंने 5 points में classify किया है, does not mean that these are 5 marking points. Each individual sub points of these 5 points, they are worth of a mark. Okay, so I just tried and I've tried to make it as easy as it can be for you to learn all of this crazy stuff and cram it in your head. चलिए जी, examiner भी फरमा रहे हैं, वो भी देख लेते हैं जरा. Examiner साहब कह रहे हैं, this was an open-ended question and candidates were able to respond very widely. Most candidates discussed habitat loss, often linking this to deforestation due to agriculture or industrialization. Climate change leading to global warming was frequently considered, as was overexploitation due to overfishing and hunting. Few candidates referred to habitat fragmentation, अक्सर बच्चों को इसका नहीं पता होता, or introduction of alien species. Okay, but overall this question was a 9 marker and a good attempted question. ठीक है जी, तो चलें जी, ये हमारा, this gets rid of the first part, which is discuss the threats to biodiversity of aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems. Now let's come to the next part, which is, I mean, why do we need to conserve? क्या मुसीबत पड़ी हुई है हमें, क्या हमने क्यों ठेका लिया हुआ कि हम इसको biodiversity को maintain करें? What are the reasons? Okay, so let's try and understand the reasons, and then inshallah again I will come to one of the papers for this. So The next thing is reasons for maintaining biodiversity. Oh yeah. All right, there you go. चलो जी, so reasons. Number one, aesthetic reasons. क्या मतलब aesthetic reasons? Aesthetic reasons कहते हैं जी कहते हैं ना कुछ लोग बहुत एस्थेटिक होते हैं कि जी कमरे की डेकोरेशन इस तरह की होनी चाहिए ऐसे एस्थेटिक मींस इट्स अ सेंस दैट सम पीपल हैव फॉर ब्यूटिफिकेशन यानी कि शायद लड़कों को इतना फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा कि उनका कमरा किस तरह का है कुछ कपड़े इधर पड़े हुए हैं कुछ बट गर्ल्स जनरली वैसे लड़कियों का भी बुरा ही हाल होता है अक्सर बट जनरली स्पीकिंग गर्ल्स आर क्वाइट एस्थेटिक व्हेन इट कम्स टू द यू नो समेटा समेटी ऑफ द रूम क्या ख्याल है मैं सही कह रहा हूँ या नहीं सही कह रहा हूँ I have all girls in my class. Is that true? Are girls by default aesthetic? Yes or no? कि आप गंद में रहना पसंद करते हैं? Yes. Okay. Yes. राबिया आपकी तरफ से कुछ जवाब नहीं आया मैं क्या assume करूं? Should I assume it's the otherwise? Okay, great. I was so much unesthetic before marriage, लेकिन my wife is super aesthetic, over aesthetic actually. तो उसकी वजह से उसकी काफ़ी influence मेरे पे भी हो गया है, and I also want my things to be very neat. Anyhow, so I mean that was just to explain what aesthetic means. So biodiversity is maintained because of aesthetic reasons. मैं आपको इसकी बड़ी simple सी example देता हूँ. You can relate to this example. You know, if you go for a holiday in northern areas and you book yourself a room, the room which has no view is going to be less expensive than the room which has a valley view, for example. You understand what I'm saying? Why is the room with the valley view more expensive? Because people, they have this aesthetic sense. They want to see and enjoy the beauty of the nature, okay? So aesthetic sense is just the reason is because people want to appreciate the beauty of nature. और ये समझ में आने वाली बात है. I mean that's I'm sure nobody says कि he or she does not appreciate when they see the nature of beauty. So again, so that's why all of the people all agree that natural ecosystems ecosystems should be maintained. So that's one argument कि जी biodiversity होनी चाहिए. The second argument is ethical reasons. Ethical reasons का क्या मतलब है? People argue कि destruction of ecosystems and loss of biodiversity is simply an ethical issue. They say we have no right or justification to destroy the nature. ठीक है जी? Destroying the planet and drive the planet to extinction. वो कहते हैं जी हमारा नहीं है. और by the way, you know, this is actually the narrative that makes sense. कि हमें I mean, we should be playing our part in maintaining the biodiversity because at the end वो हमारे लिए ही threat है अगर if we don't do that. I mean, it's very selfish of not to be kind to all of the other creation that we have apart from ourselves. खैर हम आपस में काइंड नहीं होते तो बाकियों को हम क्या भला करेंगे. बाहर चले बाकियों का ही कर दें अगर इंसानों का नहीं करना. वैसे इंसानों का सबसे ज्यादा हक बनता है आपस की बात. Anyhow, number 3, the third argument is ecological reasons. What do I mean when I say ecological reasons? Well, what I mean is ecological reasons का मतलब है, you know, it is important to maintain the biodiversity to sustain other ecosystems. Yani कि, for example, if one species gets extinct, do you think this will have no effect on this ecosystem or other ecosystems? Well, it does. Okay, because ये सारे interrelated हैं. It has a, as they say, knock-on effect on other species. This is a key word, knock-on effect on other species. आपने food chains, food webs, सारा कुछ पढ़े में, reproductive patterns disturb हो जाते हैं, feeding patterns disturb हो जाते हैं, and generally, so because we need to maintain the ecosystems and since they are interdependent, so we have ecological reasons to ensure that we do maintain biodiversity, because अगर biodiversity कम होती जाएगी तो eventually that's the road down to the extinction of species, and again that's the last thing we want. And number fourth reason and line of argument for maintaining biodiversity, या फिर why does biodiversity matter, is economic reasons. ठीक है जी, हम लालची हैं, इससे let's acknowledge. क्या मतलब, इसमें लालची की बात नहीं है, असल में majority of some of the living organisms, they become source of food. ठीक है, they are source of food, they are source of medicine. खासतौर पे जो plant sources हैं, फिर इसी तरह other resources, there are other resources for humans in different ecology, and many of these organisms have yet to be discovered and could provide new crops and new drugs, and as a source of new, यानी कि potentially for food and medicine and for other resources जिनकी कभी भी कोई भी जरूरत पड़ सकती है, मसलन aloe vera. Yes, हाँ जी, ख़वातीन को तो पता होना चाहिए इसका, क्या ख्याल है? What is aloe vera and why do you think it is very important for ladies? I have an aloe vera plant at my house, and don't ask what happens. You don't know what aloe vera does? Girls, come on. Okay. Skin, जी. Natural, जो आप ये, it's very good for your skin and the danas and the color and whatnot. So no wonder my wife always puts the aloe vera, and उसका plant इतना stink करता है, लेकिन बहरहाल उसके अंदर, yes, it's good for hair and skin. So again, I mean, these are the economical reasons. So these are the four, if you like, line of arguments जिनके around आपका ये argument घूमता है for reasons of biodiversity. Now again, coming to the question paper, discuss the reasons for, अब देखें जो question है, अब देखें यहाँ पे syllabus का point है, discuss the reasons for need for maintain to biodiversity. अब मैं आपके सामने question paper खोलता हूँ और आप हैरान हो जाएंगे कि कैम्ब्रिज वाले बेचारे वो इतने बिजी हैं, उनके पास इतना टाइम भी नहीं होता कि इसकी स्टेटमेंट कोई थोड़ा चेंज कर दे. So this is May June 2013. Question 4.2, paper 4.2, question 9b. 4.2, 9b. Okay. 9b. 9b. Okay. एक सेकेंड में मैंने सही वेरिएंट लिखा. चलें काम करते हैं, मैं उतनी देर पेपर ढूंढ के पेस्ट करता हूँ, आप 1 मिनट ब्रेक लें. 7:35 हमारा सेशन का टाइम भी एंड हो जाएगा जूम का. सो आई एम टेकिंग अ मिनट ब्रेक, प्लीज रिज्यूम आफ्टर अ मिनट एवरीबॉडी.